So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about my philosophy, live in the fast B life. So what does that mean? Well, what does it mean when you call someone a jack of all trades? We all know it comes from the quote, jack of all trades, master of none. If you Google search jack of all trades, this is the first thing that pops up. And I think it's pretty indicative to what most of us think. Calling someone a jack of all trades implies that their expertise and skills are superficial at best. It's not usually meant as a compliment. A jack of all trades is the opposite of what I wanted to be growing up. This is me as a senior at Okemos High School, just outside of Lansing, Michigan. I was your prototypical overachiever growing up, extremely concerned about my grades, taking advanced placement classes, and heavily involved in extracurriculars. I was captain of the varsity tennis team, student body co-president, and my summer job was in a university chemistry lab. All things that look great on a college application. In general, I wanted to be known as one of the smartest kids in school, and I was maybe overly concerned about what people thought of me and my accomplishments. Now, that senior year of high school, I took physics, and my teacher was a great guy named Jim Powers. Now, Mr. Powers was not only a physics teacher, but he was an O-line coach on the football team and a Hall of Fame tennis coach, my varsity tennis coach. Not really a combination you see in high school or anywhere else. Some might even call him a jack of all trades type. Now, in physics class, Mr. Powers used to teach 3 ways to solve certain physics concepts. The first way was the slow way. This was the way to get the exact right answer to the problem, 100%. Then he'd have the fast B. Almost the exact right answer, but not quite. Definitely you could get there faster. And finally, you'd have the shortcut C, which was if you just needed some partial credit. So what did this look like in class? Well, let's take calculating work done by a variable force. The slow A would involve using integrals to get the exact area under a curve, 100%. The fast B would involve using Riemann sums to get almost the exact area under the curve, but much faster, much quicker, and much easier. And finally, the shortcut C, which was draw a triangle and hope for the best. All right, so you're not up on your physics, and that's okay, who can blame you? What about drawing a circle? Well, the slow A would involve going to the store and buying a compass, because who has a compass, and getting the correct pencil, getting the exact radius you need, and drawing the perfect circle. The fast B would involve going to your cupboard and getting some cylindrical object, it's about the right radius, and tracing it. Much faster, almost the right answer. And finally, the shortcut C is just freehand it. Now, my 17-year-old brain at the time couldn't understand why anyone would bother with anything other than the slow A. This kid needed the A. So, like any good overachiever, I ignored the other methods, and I focused on that A. After high school, I decided to follow in my professor father's footsteps and study chemical engineering at the University of Michigan. Go blue! I need to hear it back. Go blue! That freshman year of college, I treated it like an extension of high school. I took difficult classes like organic chemistry and physics, overloaded my schedule with 18 credits, and ran for student government. I took it a step further after that freshman year and decided to join my close childhood friend Ryan Gregg in his business, building and selling lofts for dorm rooms. Ryan, who was also a UM student at the time, he was in charge of the production, and I was in charge of the sales. And just like that, we were in a startup. This is a loft, by the way, because they don't exist anymore. Now, for 2 budding entrepreneurs in the loft industry, There's one major issue, and that's it only exists 1 week a year. Move-in week or welcome week, whatever you want to call it. And we were itching to get into something else. Then one fateful day, I was driving my beloved Ford Probe GT Turbo down the highway when the turbo blew up. But I was lucky enough that a friendly tow truck driver named Rick was kind enough to pick me up and actually give me a ride all the way back to Ann Arbor. We got to talking, and after telling him about my life and what I've been up to, I was excited to learn that he was an entrepreneur, he too was an entrepreneur, and even had some old screen printing equipment from a prior business he was looking to sell. I was very excited. When I got back to campus, I called Ryan up, and we talked it through and said, let's do this. So we called Rick, said, we want to buy your t-shirt equipment, your screen printing equipment, and start a custom t-shirt company. We figured, hey, we're involved in campus. We could cater to various student groups and organizations. This would be easy. But it was almost over before it even started. I told you I had that slow A mentality. I started thinking about all the things that we didn't know and all the reasons we wouldn't be a success. So we called Rick up and we told him the bad news. We had to back out. But Rick was a jack of all trades who'd been through this before, and he had a rebuttal for every excuse that we could come up with. We don't know anything about screen printing. That's okay. He would teach us. We can't afford the lease payments for the spot we want to rent. We can't do this. No, that's okay. You can come set up shop in my garage next to a broken down Chevy where my golden retrievers sleep. Rick was obviously a subscriber to Mr. Power's Fast B philosophy, and he wasn't going to let us get bogged down in not knowing how things were going to end up. We just had to bite the bullet and get started. So we did. And it turns out it wasn't the worst idea in the world. In fact, our sales started to grow, word of mouth spread, and we even began to advertise. Things were looking up in the business. And it was starting to take a lot more of my time and energy. And that's when I reached a crossroads. This is me at the crossroads. You see, I still felt a lot of pressure to succeed and excel in school, and it was imperative to me that I get that chemical engineering degree. But here I was, spending all this time on this startup that seemingly had no scale, made no money, and wasn't even related to my degree. I was studying to be a chemical engineer, a highly sought after, potentially lucrative, well-respected degree. But it didn't matter. I had been bitten by the entrepreneurial bug, and it was up to me to figure out how to embrace that internal struggle and make it all work. It was around that time that I started to think back to high school physics and how insightful Mr. Power's teaching philosophy really was. I've been so focused on getting the A throughout my life at all costs, but after getting reacquainted with the Fast B in our startup, I started to look for it in all my problem sets and projects and classes. If I could get there a little faster and get the same basic end result, that was good enough for me. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Now, this is just a typical college kid, overwhelmed, stressed, making up excuses. But that's not what it was for me. It's quite the opposite. The Fast B allowed me to figure out a way to balance my schoolwork without giving up this opportunity that had presented itself. And by acknowledging that the end result wasn't going to be exactly what I had been used to, the Fast B framework helped me redefine success, especially in the classroom. Now, there's a major barrier that prevents the overachiever from subscribing to the Fast B philosophy, and it centers around the perception of success. It's not like you can just turn off the part of your brain that for all your life has been concerned about getting A's and what other people think. It's difficult when your self-worth is ingrained in the end result. For most of my life, if you ask me what I did, I'd tell you, I'm studying to be a chemical engineer. And I do this t-shirt thing on the side. I couldn't even own up to it. I put it aside. The perception was just so important to me that I didn't even stop after my bachelor's. I got my bachelor's and went on for 2 more years and got my master's degree. And when you're an overachiever who's conditioned to believe that mastery, the pinnacle of success, is the only success, well, when that's not your path, what are you left with? It's that 4-letter word that starts with F. Failure is the thing that keeps many of us entrepreneurs up at night. It's our worst case scenario. I wasn't going to swear in a church. It's the thing that keeps us up at night. It's our worst case scenario. Now, obviously, it happens all the time. And there are many books, quotes, mantras to talk about embracing failure. Now, I think we can all agree that this is a good thing. But for some of us, it's difficult to believe that failure can be a positive thing. Just look at it. The word itself can be too difficult to overcome and prevent most of us from even taking that chance because we're just not okay with failure. And if, for you, like for me, failure is truly not an option, then we need a different way to frame things so that we can take chances, take those first steps. Why is this important? Well, a recent study at Yale University concluded that the brain only learns through uncertainty, meaning we are only truly learning when we step outside our comfort zone, take those first steps. And to me, that's what the FASB method is all about. It's not about A's or B's or C's or accolades or grades. It's a way to approach opportunities and give yourself a chance to take those first steps without getting hung up on the end result. Now, I'll be the first to admit that this philosophy isn't a solution for all things. There are many situations in life where there's nothing acceptable less than an A result. If I'd been a surgeon or a pilot, then I might not be up here blathering about this to you. But as an entrepreneur, in looking back on what's given me the confidence to take those first steps, it's been my acceptance of the FASB framework that's allowed me to embrace it. It's given me the confidence to go after things like investing, mentoring, lecturing, doing other startups, and even doing a keynote every now and again. And it need not end with those first steps. What started out as a small side hustle almost 2 decades ago is now known as Underground Printing, a national custom printed apparel company with locations throughout the country and over 250 employees. So let's circle back to our friend, Jack of all trades. In researching for this talk, I actually was shocked to learn that the quote that I knew so well wasn't the actual quote. It was cut off. The actual quote goes like this: "A jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one." And this blew my mind. This quote, this term that I'd known for all my life as a negative, was actually written as a positive all along. And in fact, our obsession with mastery as success might actually be wrong. It might be a limiting factor for most of us. And if we can just reframe the way that we look at success, then we open ourselves to opportunities and experiences that we never would have taken before. Now, I realize this is a tech talk and I'm preaching to the choir here, pun intended. And so, this is probably something that you believe in and subscribe to. But for me, It's really about framing it in such a way that someone can resonate with. And I've been fortunate enough that calling it the fast B versus failing often and failing fast has given people some of the okay to move forward. And if that works for you in talking with it to someone else, well then I think you've done myself and Mr. Powers proud. Thank you very much.